So I'm a documentary producer, and I have a little company called Stony Brook Films, which my brothers renamed Stoned and Broke Films. a not-for-profit film company, but I think of myself as a storyteller, which means that I use my imagination in the telling, but I generally don't make it up. I make a kind of a story called nonfiction, and I try to keep the fiction out of it. Mostly they're science stories. So it's space or ecology, biology, climate, a lot of different subjects. And what I try to do when I get my science story, when I'm assigned one or I manage to get one of my own produced, is I like to get my facts in a row, and then I like to work on making the story more accessible to people who might not have a scientific background, because science can be a little impenetrable to people who, you know, they're not particularly interested in science, but still knowing things is really important. And so I like to imagine as well, like my science writing hero Carl Sagan once did. And the power of nonfiction can really change the way you see the world. For instance, did you know that the 100 trillion cells that make up each one of us is actually outnumbered 10 to 1 by the cells that live in us and on us? We're actually worlds unto ourselves. And these are organisms, maybe 10,000 species, that live only in us. And we depend on them for life, and they depend on us. And so if you can imagine you're down on the plains of the Serengeti, and the wildebeest are thundering by, and the zebras, and it's alive with life and birds. And then you pull up to the satellite view. What do you see? You don't see the animals. What you see is the outlines of the land and the earth. Well, every morning when you look in the mirror, you're seeing actually the satellite view of yourself. And actually each of us is kind of a teeming world. There was another show I did. I reversioned a 3-part series, a BBC series called, it was called 23 Degrees. It was about the Earth's orbit around the sun. And the 3 episodes were orbit, tilt, and spin. And basically what you find out is that the climate has always changed. It's always been changing, but it always changes for a reason. And you know, people want to say, well, you know, is it humans who are changing the planet? Is there one thing or another? No, it's many things, and it's all working in concert. But one of the interesting details is that 80 million years ago, there was no ice and snow on the Earth at all, and sea levels were 600 to 800 feet higher than they are today. And just 20,000 years ago, during the last glaciation, sea levels were 400 feet lower. So if you think about that as a gauge for climate change, a variation of 1,000 to 1,200 feet in sea level, I mean, think about an extra 800 feet of sea level right here in Michigan. Michigan wouldn't exist. So that's the power of nonfiction. It can change the way you look at things. I think that people have been telling stories since the beginning of language. And so much of what we hear today, we pick up today, comes to us in the story form. And I think oral tradition is something that's been with us for a very long time. 2 ancient cultures, you know, they have collections of stories that carry their cosmologies and their heroes, their villains, their histories, you know, their beliefs. But I don't think that oral traditions are just the domain of ancient and arcane civilizations. I think we're building one today, except our oral tradition resides in television and video. I mean, this is where our oral storytelling is going on. And when you think about what's on TV today, I don't know, it worries me a little bit, because my kind of story, which is evidence and fact-based, or I try to make it so, is kind of losing ground to reality TV. So nonfiction is losing ground to reality. It sounds funny, but that's really what's happening. And I worry that people aren't hearing the stories about the world, about science, about history. They aren't getting the information, because Nielsen says, the ratings people say, that on average, Americans watch 5 hours of TV a day. Really? I mean, I'm not watching that much, but somebody is. And actually, there's a wonderful statistic that says that kids, I'm not quite sure what the age cutoff is, are holding down the equivalent of a full-time job every day, consuming media. 7 hours and 38 minutes, and that's everything. You know, it's texting and video and all the rest of it. And I'm just worried that that a lot of information is getting by us, or we're just not getting it. So I want to tell you a little story about what happened to me. I was hired at sorry, I almost made a mistake there, at Discovery Channel, and in 2006, and immediately I was assigned 2 different stories. One was one of the great discoveries in science of all time, and the other was about some crab fishermen in the Bering Sea. Both were expensive, difficult, risky production. Both were with people who had a deep distrust of media, and so the pressure was on. So the science story first. In 1992, a paleoanthropologist named Tim White discovered the fossil remains of a new hominid in the Afar of Ethiopia, and they called it Ardipithecus ramidus. And 2 years later, they found a partial skeleton, which was kind of miraculous, and they nicknamed it Ardi. And Ardi was 1 million years older than Lucy. Now, Lucy's that other hominid that everyone seems to know about, or a very famous one. And but the problem with Lucy was that Lucy was already up walking around on 2 feet and didn't really answer the question about how we stood up. You know, human beings are the only committed bipeds on the planet, and there was a transition there, and how did that happen? And so we hope to answer that question in the documentary. And Owen Lovejoy, who was the scientist, one of the scientists on the team, had said some very interesting things. He had said that you know, the incisors on some of these apes, some of these teeth were short, and that meant that they were doing something that allowed them to pass on their genes. And so what was that? Well, they were pair bonding with females. So this deal was made a long time ago that the men would go out and get the food and the women would stay home and raise the kids. I mean, sound familiar? It's an ancient deal. So anyway, we fought over this thing. It was a great struggle. Tim White didn't even like the word story because it implied fiction. We got it made. It aired after 2.5 years. Discovery pulled out the stops, did all the great promotion, and it kind of fell flat. It got a decent rating, but not many people watched it. It was aired a second time, and then it kind of went away. Deadliest Catch, a completely different situation. I mean, I had been a commercial fisherman for 10 years after college. So when I got assigned this thing, I was floored because it was just kind of some weird cosmic lineup that after 10 years of commercial fishing, I should get this great show. And the fishermen, you know, Sig Hansen and John and Andy Hillstrand and Phil Harris while he was alive, were all really happy that there was somebody there. And the great thing about Deadliest Catch was we didn't have to make it up. It was a genuine article. You couldn't fake the fishing, you couldn't fake the boats, the weather, any of it. And there were natural dramatic elements. There were fathers and sons, there were brothers, there was family. And this helped us kind of make this rare thing a nonfiction reality show. So Deadliest Catch did really well, and in 2011 we won an Emmy for it, which was a great thing, and we won it because we were that rare thing, a nonfiction reality show. So Deadliest Catch's I don't know, success has become very well known around the industry, and so everybody's tried to knock it off. And there's a lot of reality out there now. It doesn't really qualify as nonfiction. It's certainly not unscripted, and people are really going for it. The numbers are just astonishing, and you know, even though it's kind of dummied up, a lot of us can't understand why. But actually, I think it's like kids and candy. You know, if you give kids a choice, they're going to go for candy, and they're going to go for soda pop. And I think that's what's happening with reality. But the problem is that there's not much nutrition in junk food and candy and sugar. And there's not really much nutrition in reality TV either. And I'll tell you what we worry about. Some of us worry that we're at a place now on the planet where by 2050 there are going to be 9 billion people. Everybody's going to need food, water, shelter, education, energy. And how are we going to do that? We have such problems. And the only way I see it happening is if the greatest number of people make small contributions. That's really the only way it's going to happen. But if we're not getting nutrition out of our TV, if our oral tradition isn't serving the traditional, I don't know, the traditional, doing the job of conveying information to us, I kind of worry about that. I think it's an irony that we live in the information age, and it's harder than ever to get at the truth of the matter. You can't really tell what's true from what's not, and when you can't tell what's true and what's not, you lose track of the horizon. You don't really know where you are. We're at a place now where we really need to see the world clearly. We really need to think like scientists, but we need the information to make those decisions, to think like scientists. We need to know that stuff, and we're not getting it. And you know, I don't want to be sanctimonious or self-righteous. I think, you know, if you want to watch Honey Boo Boo, go ahead. You know, but balance it with a little Nova or a Frontline or some Smithsonian Channel or you know, or Brain Games. Get some nutrition out of your television, because actually what's going on is the world is going this way, but if you listen to television, it's all a distraction. And so I think we've all got to start moving, and I think television, nonfiction television, has a very important role to play in kind of bringing people along and educating people. And education is, you know, commercial television broadcasters, they hate the word education because it means boring, it means a lesson. And I think there's been a fatigue. Am I doing that? I think there's been a fatigue. You know, people don't like to hear about problems all the time. There is a tone that's been in environmental films in particular that's kind of, I don't know, cloying. But we're getting better at that. And so I'm not quite sure how to turn this around, because the money and the numbers is going toward reality. So I think, I don't know what to tell you, except that I would urge everybody to look to television for more nutrition, more information, and because for those of us making television, we will try to tell good stories, tell them well, and not make them up. Because you really don't have to. You don't have to make it up. You can't make it up any better than it really happens. So that's really what I had to say, and thank you very much.